Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. I'm really excited to dive into this one today because we're tackling a super fascinating dynamic in legal systems. We're looking at that intense friction between granting individual exceptions to a rule and managing public perception. Like, have you ever wondered why perfectly logical exceptions are sometimes just flat out rejected by lawmakers? Well, today we're going to analyze a highly specific, brilliantly argued Talmudic text that gets right to the heart of this problem. It's a deep, analytical journey, so let's jump right in and see how personal dynamics clash with the need for societal order.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the dinner table dilemma, move on to a historical case with Betos and the Syrian cakes, look at the risk of public confusion, examine a counterargument called the one-shirt exception, and wrap it up by comparing visible versus hidden exceptions.
Section 1. The dinner table dilemma. So to really get this, let's start with something we all understand. Sitting down for a meal. But in this case, a meal bound by strict dietary laws.
Now, we have to establish the baseline rules here, and it's absolutely crucial to differentiate between two levels of law. On one hand, you've got the core Torah law, which strictly forbids eating meat and dairy together. That's the foundation. But, legal systems often build fences to protect their core laws, right? So we also have a rabbinic decree acting as a safeguard. The sages ruled that acquaintances can't even sit at the same table if one is eating meat and the other is eating cheese. Why? Well, human nature. If you know the person across from you, it is just so easy to reach over and say, hey, try a bite of this. And boom, the core Torah law is broken. The safeguard is there to nip that risk in the bud.
But here's where things get incredibly analytical. A scholar named Rav Yaimar poses the ultimate stress test. He asks, okay, what if the two diners are brothers, but they're currently in a massive feud? They're so stubborn they'd probably build a brick wall down the middle of the table if they could. They absolutely refuse to share food. So, if the entire point of the rabbinic safeguard is to prevent sharing, and the personal dynamic here literally guarantees they won't share, can we grant them an exception? Can they sit together with their separate meat and cheese dishes? The internal logic says the risk is zero, so the rule shouldn't apply, right?
Section 2. Betos and the Syrian cakes. To answer that dilemma about the brothers, a scholar named Abaye doesn't just say yes or no. He looks back at a fascinating historical precedent regarding the holiday of Passover.
This precedent perfectly illustrates how exceptions actually function. During Passover, there's a strict prohibition against eating leavened bread. You can only eat flat, unleavened bread. Now, in ancient times, people loved making these intricate, elaborately decorated baked goods called Syrian cakes. But look at the sequence here. Creating those elaborate decorations takes a ton of time. And while the baker is busy crafting the design, the dough is just sitting there idle. If dough sits idle, it ferments. It becomes leavened. So baking these cakes poses a massive risk of violating Passover law. Because of that risk, the sages issued a blanket ban. No elaborate Syrian cakes on Passover, period.
Enter a guy named Betos ben Zunin. Betos was a master baker, and he goes to the sages with basically the exact same argument as our feuding brothers. He says, listen, I have this unique, super efficient method. I can decorate these Syrian cakes so incredibly fast that there is absolutely zero risk of the dough leavening. He's arguing that because the practical risk can apply to his specific, exceptional skills, he should be exempt from the ban.
So what did the sages say? A definitive no. And their reasoning is perfectly captured in this quote. All the decorated Syrian cakes are forbidden, but the Syrian cakes of Betos are permitted? You can almost hear the incredulity there, right? They weren't doubting his baking speed at all. They were worried about something entirely different. Section 3. The risk of public confusion. This rejection actually reveals a profound insight into how laws survive in society. The absolute crux of the issue is this. When the public sees an exception, they do not see the hidden personal dynamics. If people see Betos selling decorated Syrian cakes on Passover, they have no idea he's using a super fast secret technique. All they see is an established strict rule being broken with permission. And then what? Everyone else starts baking them, taking their sweet time, and breaking the core Passover law. So, bringing this back to the dinner table, Abaye applies this exact logic to the feuding brothers. If we let them eat meat and cheese at the same table, anyone walking by the window won't know they have a personal rivalry. They'll just see two acquaintances eating meat and cheese together, assume the rabbinic decree is canceled, and the whole safeguard collapses. So to avoid public confusion, no exception for the brothers.
Section 4. The one-shirt exception. Sounds like an airtight case, doesn't it? No exceptions, keep the public from getting confused. But Rav Yaimar, our resident stress tester, is not done. He points out a glaring contradiction.
Let's put these precedents side by side. On the left, we've got the Syrian cakes. No exception allowed, even for a fast baker, to prevent public confusion. But on the right, Rav Yemar points to a well-known law about the intermediate days of a festival. The sages strictly prohibited laundering clothes during these days, so people would do their chores before the holiday. But there is a famous exception. If someone only owns a single shirt and it gets dirty, they are legally permitted to launder it on the intermediate days of a festival.
This is a massive paradox. Rav Yemar throws Zabai's logic right back at him. If we are so terrified of public confusion, why doesn't the public say in this case, all washing is prohibited on the intermediate days of a festival, but this person's washing is permitted? Why does the system care so deeply about public perception for the baker and the brothers, but completely toss it out the window for the guy doing his laundry? Are the sages just being inconsistent?
Section 5. Visible versus hidden exceptions. This contradiction pushes the text to a brilliant final layer of synthesis. How on earth do we reconcile these two entirely different approaches?
A scholar named Mar, the son of Rav Ashi, steps in with the answer, and it relies entirely on ancient fashion. The key is the belt. Back then, people usually only had one belt, worn securely over their shirt. Think about it, if you only own one shirt and you have to wash it, you gotta take it off. But you still need your belt to hold up your lower garments, so you wrap your belt directly over your bare skin. Mar explains that this is a glaring, undeniable visual indicator. When the public sees this guy washing a shirt, they don't just see a rule being broken. They see him wearing a belt on his bare body. The physical reality instantly communicates the exception. People see it and think, oh, right, he doesn't have a second shirt. There's zero confusion because the reason for the exception is visually obvious to literally everyone.
This synthesis table brings the whole framework together perfectly. Look at the two brothers. Their dynamic, refusing to share food, is that visible to the public? No, it's an internal feeling. So, the final ruling? No exception. What about Betos' cakes? His dynamic is a fast baking method. Is that visible? No, it's a hidden skill happening behind closed doors. So again, no exception. But then we have the single shirt. The dynamic is owning just one shirt. Is the exception visible? Yes, it's proven undeniably by the belt on the bare skin. Therefore, exception allowed. The sages aren't being inconsistent at all. They're drawing a razor-sharp legal line. A legal system can only grant an exception to a safeguard if the justification is as plainly visible to the public as the rule itself. If it relies on hidden, internal realities, granting it will destroy the public's trust in the law.
Which leaves us with this final, really profound question to think about today. If a law's survival depends entirely on public perception, how do we balance individual realities against the need for societal order? These ancient texts are basically telling us that sometimes, even if your personal reality makes a law completely unnecessary for you, you still have to uphold it, just to protect the fabric of the community around you. Unless, of course, you have a metaphorical belt to prove your case to the world. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this deep dive sparked some curiosity about the incredible logic behind legal systems. Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and I'll see you next time.